All right, good evening to everyone out there in our virtual space. We want to welcome you again to part two of the color contrast conversation. On last week, we had an amazing time sharing together. And so we look forward to part two of this conversation. Now, as you are coming into the virtual space, I need you to do me this favor. I need you to go on ahead and invite your friends, invite your family members to this conversation. Start a watch party right where you are. We want you to join this conversation. We know that many of you are watching us either by way of Facebook or watching us by way of our YouTube channel. But what we want you to come on in and be a part. And once you come on in, let us know that you're here. Hit something in the comment box to let us know that you are in this space. We're going to have great conversation tonight. And so you want to take this time to tell people, come on in and don't miss this conversation, the color contrast conversation. Well, I'm going to begin by introducing again our guests with you on today. And so we are again always blessed to have as one of our panelists our very own First Lady, Lady Rashonda James, here with us, who is also the president and CEO of Brighter Hope LLC, located here in the Metro East. We are also blessed to have with us from the Missouri side, Miss Christian Shields, who is a social worker and a true blessing to the community as an advocate. And we're also happy to have with us Miss Sydney Dawson, all the way from Maryland, who serves at the Alumni Relations in Johns Hopkins. So we're glad to have her with us as well. And Mr. Shafiq Hinton, who is on here with us as well, who serves as a realtor in the state of Maryland. Listen, we are just so glad to have everybody in this space. Last week was just awesome dialogue. And I mean, we just had to come back and have some part two of this, some more conversation. And thank you all for those of you who sent emails, text messages to let us know just how blessed you were by this conversation. And so tonight we're going to go and dive a little deeper in. Last week we got to talk about race and talked a little bit about rage, but we're going to take this thing even further, talking about rage and the future of America. Listen, I also want to share with, if there's anybody out there, if you have a question or something that you want us to touch on tonight, please don't, hesitate to put it in the comment, and we will be sure to lift it and raise it to the best of our ability. And so tonight, for those of you who are with us for the first time, on last week, we just named our identity markers. And so we're going to do that again for you tonight, so that you can identify yourself with how we identify ourselves. And I'm going to begin that on tonight. And so I am Reverend J. Kevin James Jr. I'm the senior pastor of Macedonia Baptist Church. I am a 29-year-old Black man, married, living in America, educated, and excited about this conversation tonight, and very much still, in some regards, frustrated with what's happening in our country, and allowing my frustration to be channeled by being a voice for the oppressed. So that's how I identify myself. Lady James, if you can go ahead and just introduce or identify yourself.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Lady Rashonda James. I am a manager of talent and HR with Relay Graduate School, based out of New York. I am also the founder and CEO of Brighter Hope. I am a Christian Black female. I am 29. I grew up a low income, but would consider myself now middle class.
Thank you so much, First Lady. All right, Miss Christian Shields, if you could go ahead and identify yourself for us.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Shields. I am a 29-year-old educated Black woman. I am the founder and CEO of My Secret's Purpose and the creator of the My Secret's Purpose conference. I am also a social worker, constantly advocating within these institutions. And I am also a Christian, and I would consider myself middle class.
Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Miss Sydney Dawson.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be back here for part 2 of this conversation. My name is Sydney Dawson. I am a 26-year-old biracial woman, the only child of a Black man and a white woman. I was raised in Bel Air, Maryland, which is a predominantly white community, and I attended a predominantly white university. And I now live in Baltimore, Maryland, and work at a predominantly white university. So, you know, this movement I talked about last week a little bit, how it's really helped me with finding kind of a revelation in that I have had a hard time identifying myself because of the confusion of being biracial and what that means, and not having too many people who relate to my situation. But I'm so grateful for this conversation and the other conversations that this movement has brought about, because it's really helping me, and I believe it's helping the world. So again, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here tonight.
Thank you so much. All right, Mr. Hinton, come on and identify yourself with us.
So again, I'm Shafiq Hinton. I am from Baltimore, Maryland, the Northeast, currently live in the Northeast part of the county. Again, I am a 28-year-old Black male. I did cut my hair because you guys were making fun of my COVID cut. So I'm happy to start to get back to normal. But yeah, you know, I've always been known that I was a Black man my entire life. I'm proud of that. And I always identify myself as a connector. I'm a professional sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. So I do neurological sales for addiction. And I'm also a small business owner. I do represent the state of Maryland as a licensed realtor. So all you Marylanders out there, little silent plug, come see your boy. But yeah, excited to get this thing moving. What we're doing is powerful. We've made a huge impact last week, and I can't wait to share the updates and some of the big things that have already happened from our conversation, and looking forward to see what we can do tonight.
Thank you so much for sharing. Listen, guys, as we start this conversation tonight, and I know many of you people have reached out to you since last week. I know I've had several of my friends to reach out. I've had members of my church, members of the community and abroad who watched this conversation, and they were, you know, just in awe as to, you know, just intelligent individuals coming together to address just some of the issues that's taking place in our communities, in our ethnicity, or our race, whatever we want to call it. And so I just kind of want to hear from you all. You know, what were some of the things that you were hearing, if people were reaching back out to you? And Sydney, if I could come to you, just kind of starting with you, because I know this was definitely taking you out of your comfort zone and really allowing you to unpack these tough conversations. So how has it been for you since we've had this conversation?
Yeah, it's been, you know, I was thinking earlier today, I feel like today I've been much more excited than nervous about this conversation tonight. And I think last week I was more nervous than excited. But I think that speaks to how much I've grown personally and how much this movement has helped everyone have these kind of conversations. Because just in this last week, I feel much more comfortable speaking up, sharing my experience. And I've gotten an overwhelming response from friends, from family, from coworkers. I mean, I've been really blessed to be part of the conversations that we've been having in my professional setting. And I feel like I've been very supported and very heard, and it's moving. You know, I've shared experiences that I think I had kind of suppressed, or I kind of pushed back in my professional setting, and I didn't feel safe speaking up at the time or until now, really. And this movement and these conversations have made me feel safe enough and supported enough and comfortable enough to share, you know, what I've experienced and things that have happened. And I really do believe that it's moving us toward a place to fix things, to at least be more aware, so that we can speak up when we're experiencing something that's uncomfortable, so that we can hopefully make those experiences less often. So it's been amazing. And this being part of this group has been a big part of that for me. So again, I'm just so grateful.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and that's powerful. You made the statement that this conversation has made you feel safe, and that really is a powerful statement, because as we think about this conversation around race and the conversation around the rage and even the future of America, the reality is some people will not have these conversations because they don't feel safe, or they don't feel like they have a safe space to be able to unload and unpack these things. So I'm happy to hear that. Shafiq, I kind of want to come to you, especially as a Black man that finds himself in an interracial relationship or marriage. How has this impacted the conversation, maybe even with your family or just people that you guys are connected to?
It's been incredible. It almost, to be honest, it almost moved me to tears after the first episode. My wife's family, my excuse me, my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, they shared that with their family, and they said very powerful speaker, so moving, so motivational, and that they admit that they need to be educated on Black culture and things like that. So I just want to. I know he's a low-key guy, but I have to shout out my father-in-law, Mr. Steve. I mean, he has blown me away with what he was able to do in less than a week. The very next day, that Friday, he sent our broadcast to his diversity chair, who's a Black woman at AKA, and he had another conversation with her for an entire hour. And I know one thing that resonated with him, we kind of talked about it on the broadcast. If God blesses us with children, those children are going to be Black children. And he said he knew that, but he did not know what it meant to actually have Black grandchildren. Like, what does that mean? Right. So I think that might have struck a chord with him. And we went to his house on Sunday. We had a deeper conversation on Sunday. He was sharing and challenging his family members. And then this morning, he's a sharp man. 8:01 this morning, his text message said, "Hey, for the first 45 minutes of our leadership call at his job, we spent the first 45 minutes talking about Black Lives Matter, racism, and why we don't have people of color in our senior leadership team. And we have made a vow to change that. So if you're really about this, if you're really down for this, I don't need your apologies. I need your equity. I need your investment." And my father-in-law, I'm proud of him. And like I said, it almost moved me to tears to see what type of movement and disruption he can make in his company in less than a week. Okay, because that's what we need. We need white men to stand up, white men with power to stand up. He is a white man with power, and I know he does not want to live in a world where his grandson gets gunned down for riding his bike at their vacation home, or for playing cops and robbers in his vacation home. And he knows that, he realized that, and now he's starting. So what I would say to everyone is, like we talked last week about, should you ignore people, how you should spend your energy? Ask yourself if that person coming to you is seeking to be understood or seeking to understand you. And that's how you know when and where to spend your energy on educating somebody. Everyone's not looking for a history lesson. They're looking for ways to change. We talked about capitalism, and my father-in-law, he's making moves, and we'll see what comes from it.
That's good. And that is, for me, that's been my prayer in this season that we're in as a country, because I don't know about you all, but I feel the shift. I feel a difference in what's happening now versus what we've seen before. And, with the Michael Brown Jr.'s or the Freddie Grays or the Sandra Blands, now we're seeing our Generation Z. We're not taking it. We are here to educate, but we also won't be silenced. And I'm just so excited to hear that a white man who has a position of power is not using it to just offer apologies, but using it as a place to be educated and to take what they have learned to educate. And that's what it's about. is education, education, education. So I'm happy to hear that. I want to come over here to Christian and the First Lady. I want to hear from you all, especially as Black women in settings that are predominantly led by white men, white women. How has it been for you, both of you, since this conversation? Christian, I'll come to you first, and then First Lady, you just kind of come, behind that. But how has it been for you all since we've had this conversation?
I'm be honest, it's been what it's been in regards to what I live every day. It's been constant advocacy. I would say that in regards to what it's been. But as far as going into these leadership meetings, I can say that our first team meeting back together, we started the meeting off with kind of just addressing it. I guess that's the thing, to start off with it first. And I kind of took the back seat at that point because I wanted to hear what the rest of the team was going to say, be it that it's not that many, it's me and one other Black woman that's on the team. And so I kind of let them lead first and came in last and closed the meeting out with having some conversation and diving deeper into what it really means to bring about change right now. It's more than a moment. It's more than opening up in prayer. It's more than throwing money at people, throwing that money at organizations. It's more than putting on benefit concerts. It's more than putting out statements. It was like a call to action to wrap your next move around what you put out. And so I say, like last week, I said, let's put pressure on it. And I'm going to continue to put pressure on, because I can't just accept anything when there's policies that need to be changed, when there's legislators and bureaucracies that work against us, when there is when you have these institutions who put you in silos and think that that's supposed to solve a problem. It's so much more. When you got mental health, that's been an issue, but now you have double issues that build up on top of that. When you have communities that don't have the resources, because the resources are attached to social issues that aren't ever addressing anything. And so for me, it's constantly speaking in spaces that I'm allowed, that I'm in right now, and constantly pushing people and challenging them, asking them, so what's next? What's your plan? Because after the protesters get out the street, what is your company going to do? And it's so crazy, because I just had a conversation over dinner today with my godmother, and we were talking about how a lot of these companies depend on having people depend on these companies to have employment. That means I have to take my great idea. You all have to take your great ideas as small businesses, make it all the way up to the top, get a certain amount of revenue in order to bring in employees. And so helping us channel through how many layers this actually, is built up on. Where are we in this, and what can we do, and how can we advocate from whatever space that we are in? And then also, when it comes to what he said about, educating people and determining if you're going to spend your energy on something. I mean, the way that I'm looking at this right now is if I see you flexing your privilege, I'm going to call you out, microaggression or not. And before, even now, I was doing it, which made me difficult to have to work with. But even more so now, moving forward, I'm going to continue to apply pressure and make sure you are aware on site what you're doing. And that goes for whoever, because we have to do this collectively. And we also have to make sure we're getting something out of it. I don't want an apology. I want to see something change.
That's good. First Lady?
Yeah, I think since the conversation last week, I think that I came into that conversation really, really tired, right? I came into it like, why is this happening again? Like, why are we having this discussion again? Why don't people see? Why are people just being woke? And then after that conversation, there was like a new fire that was lit in me. And it was like, I can't stop now. I can't quiet down now. I have to continue to be unapologetically vocal. I have to continue to call out, anti or racist norms in the institution that I work in, or just in spaces that I occupy. And so I think for me, I walked out of that conversation with the confidence of no longer being apologetic for saying that I'm tired. But I'm tired in a new type of way. Like, I'm tired in a way that, like, I am about to, like, give it all to you. And no matter how hard it may seem, no matter how hard it may sound, like, let's stop tiptoeing around the issues and let's be real. And let's be real about how you really feel and how you really think about me. And so what was really, really interesting is I think the day of or the day before our first conversation, I ended up getting a DM from a teacher that I used to teach with, and me and him had a very interesting back and forth about 5 years ago, about a Black young 16-year-old who was in Prairie Hall, who ended up running over a white female police officer. And the story says that they were called because they thought that the were breaking into the house. She came to the house, her gun, and he stepped on the gas and ran her over. And how tragic that, what was tragic about that was that people only realized the lives of one person and didn't realize that the life of this teenager was also gone. And so we got in that back and forth of like, what does trauma look like when a 16-year-old boy who is fearing for his life, who sees a gun that's drawn on him, has seen Freddie Gray die. He's seen Michael Brown die. He's seen Trayvon Martin die. And in that moment is fight or flight, right? And so for me, I'm like, should he been out of school? Absolutely not. But then we got to call into question, like, where was his parents? Why did they not make sure he was at school? Where was the school administrators? Why didn't they call when they realized that he wasn't in attendance? Like, all of these things come into play, and that is the system that is against so many of our young Black and brown kids. And so for me to get a DM from someone and say, you know what? Now looking at it in retrospect, I was wrong. Like, thank you for opening up my eyes and realizing that it wasn't just about being one-sided, and understanding and having empathy for the cop and the family that lost that person, but it was also having empathy for that child, no matter the wrong decision that he made, understanding all of the other things that he could have been thinking about. And so it was like those types of feedback that I've been getting. And then on Tuesday, having a meeting with the chief public defender of St. Clair County and having a really, really transparent conversation around like, why is it that there's a police task force that's in Southern Illinois that is solely banded together to stop young Black boys, to search them for no reason so that they can find a gun in the car. And then in Illinois, if you are found with a gun in the car, it's an automatic charge. And so whether or not you was using the gun to do illegal activity, whether or not you were just, you know, had it because you don't feel safe in your community, like, the fact that there are these types of things that are put together just to keep people down, just to get people in trouble for no apparent reason, and not really understanding or asking questions of why are you choosing to do that, and automatically being like, you're a criminal, or putting a charge on their record. And then what happens when a charge goes on your record? It really does shape the trajectory of your whole entire life. And so having those transparent conversations with her and being like, you are a white woman who is in power, like, how can Brighter Hope, you know, collaborate with you, partner with the public defender's office, who has at least like 200 and something cases each, when there are people that can be rehabilitated before they even hit a judge and stabilize, so that we can either lessen sentences, or instead of giving them time, we can get them on probation and really help give them the services that they need.
Wow, that's awesome. And I pray that those of you who are watching are really listening to a lot that's being said in this space. These is so many rich responses that are coming from each and every one of you. And really, to John, to get back to what we were talking about on last week, of this aspect of rage. And I've heard many of you just kind of talking and just saying, you know, I'm tired, you know, keep the apologies, save the apologies. We want to see the change. We want to see the advocacy. And so when we think about rage and the rage that we've been seeing amongst our communities, and individuals being out there and protesting, whether it be peacefully or out there, you know, protesting in a more aggressive fashion, how do you think that the protesting has been effective? How do you think this rage, this aspect of rage, has been effective? I'm gonna start with you, Shafiq. How do you think this rage that we've been experiencing has been effective?
Yeah, I mean it's a interesting thing because we have to attack this from multiple levels. You know, I commend what the protesters are doing. I mean, protest is not really in me. I don't like people that much. I like individuals, but those people are out there putting their lives on the line, and we have to respect them. And they're upset, and they're doing what they feel like is right and pushing their opinion. We all have different talents, and we need those soldiers out there on the front line on that battlefield for us. One thing that I will say, when our protesters are called rioters or looters or things like that, that's not the case. It's just we as Black people, whoever's doing our PR, we need to fire them. All right, because when West Virginia wins their football game, those kids are rioting and they don't get called criminals or anything. They just setting stuff on fire because they won or lost a game. What's the difference? I feel like they don't have a worthy cause, but they do it. And then here's my favorite one. When you go into the museum and you see all those collection of artwork, they call that something that they found on an excursion, an artifact that they found on an excursion. Nah, my brother, you looted that. You robbed, you stole, and you privileged a whole entire country to bring that back. So we have to stop letting them spin the narrative. And I think that is exactly why rest in peace, George Floyd. Why George Floyd's murder woke a lot of people up, because there was not enough to spin the narrative to make him look like a criminal or a bad person. And people finally had to say, okay, there is a problem, and I'm open to listening. But the protesters, we need you guys to continue to fight. And I will do what I have to do on the back end to communicate with people and fight those battles that people don't want to fight in other ways. But we need you guys to continue fighting. It's been extremely effective. The whole world is protesting, and we're together, and we have to be united. We got to stop shaming our brothers for going to protest and hugging police. That's not the right message. If that's what he feels in his heart or her heart, let him do that. And you know, I don't like to say that it's war, but Donald Trump said that it's war. And when you have war, you have casualties. And some people will unfortunately perish, but that's the cost of war. So until change happen, there will be no peace in a revolution. You see what I'm saying? Peace is after the revolution. So keep fighting, keep finding your lane, keep finding your voice. I know Christian, she's been talking about that a lot, about finding, Sydney has been talking about that a lot, finding her voice. We're here for you, and we're going to support everybody, and we're not stopping anytime soon, because when I was pledging, we always said, tired, what the fuck is tired? Excuse my language, Pastor, but that's the energy that we have to have.
All right, Christian.
I can say this. I think that what is happening right now as it relates to what is the outcome of protesters, I think that we've seen some push, right? You see that cases have been opened up. You see that new laws are being presented. You have a lot of people having conversation in these institutions where I'm holding a seat. We are having difficult conversation that is challenging them, and really, like, the questions being asked are causing them to have to show who they really are and what they really represent. We're digging deep into the background, like how you were born, how were you raised, how are you responding right now, even having to slow those people down. And I have to keep coming back to institutions because that's where most of my work is right now, but it is in response to what's happening. So it is having those conversations of, where do we go from here? What does this look like? What changes do we need to make? And it's also that conversation of quit coming to the Black people and just asking us, what do we want and what do we want to see change? I mean, I'm kind of putting that back on them. What have you noticed? What have you identified? What have you done during your hiring process? Those sort of things, and making them answer their own questions instead of picking my brain to get information on moving forward. But I think that all of this is in response to what you see with protesters. There are people that are out there being peaceful, and there are people out there that are angry. But what do you expect from people who have been enraged? What do you expect for people whose siblings were raising siblings? I mean, when I say this, like, you want us to be out here mild mannered, we're giving y'all lived experience. So don't expect me to be kind all the time. But I do agree that we do have to respect wherever a person is. We are multi-layered, we are multi-passionate, which means that we have to give regard to whatever angle a person wants to come in on. We don't get to say where their voice gets to land or how powerful their voice gets to be. That's not our role, but our role is to give and do wherever we are supposed to give and do, wherever we are created to give. That's our role.
That's good. That's good. Sydney, want to just kind of hear from you. Seeing this rage that's happening around us, and then, even you saying the conversations that you've been having at work, how has this rage, has it been effective? Are you seeing it as effective?
I think the response to rest in peace George Floyd's death and the movement that's come from this has been louder than I think things have in the past, and that's a beautiful thing. I think it's too loud to silence at this point, and I've seen it be more effective than movements in the past, just in my own communities. I myself attended 2 protests this past weekend, one in Baltimore and one in the city I was raised in, Bel Air. It was very interesting for me to attend protests in both of those cities. They were different, but they were powerful. And the protest that I attended in Baltimore City, it was humongous. I don't even know how many people were there. And I would say it was a majority of white people, which was so powerful, and it was beautifully peaceful. And I can count the number of police officers I saw on maybe 2 hands. I mean, it was amazing. And I went with my sign, and I went with my boyfriend who was white, and we held hands, and it was really moving. And then I went to the protest the next day in Bel Air, and it was smaller. The city's smaller. It's predominantly white. There's differences in the city, but the fact that there was a protest for Black Lives Matter in my predominantly white town that I grew up in was progress. And I think that's something to be said for this particular rage, this response, and that it is becoming more effective, but we still have so far to go. And I think about, I've seen this article about how they painted Black Lives Matter in DC, in the road leading to the White House, right? And that's amazing. That's beautiful. I love that it's now called Black Lives Matter Plaza. But in the article, they said, this is great, but what's next? We need policy change. We need things that are going to continue, not just something that you can read, on the road, but things that are actually going to allow the change to build upon itself, so that we can start attacking, systemic racism, things that are so ingrained in our society. We need that kind of change. We don't necessarily need the mural on the street, although it's amazing. We need the change that's going to prove that Black lives have mattered, So while we have made strides in this movement so far, I think it's just important to focus on where we can continue to go. But I am certainly taking pause and being proud and grateful for what we've accomplished so far.
That's good. That's good. And I was listening to you talk about Bel Air and just kind of them having a protest. It just kind of really made me think about even the area that I live in now, in the Southern Illinois area. Some months ago, there was we were driving on Illinois 159, which leads you into different areas like Fairview Heights and Swansea. And we were heading from church on the way back home, my wife and I. And driving on 159, there was a church, predominantly white congregation that was out, and they had signs of babies. And, they were arguing about, abortion and it not being right, and, people having their babies and the right to not choose whether to have or not to have. And again, that's a whole nother conversation within itself. But I said to my wife the other week, as we were driving through Belleville, which is another area on 159, there were 2 white ladies, standing in the square with signs. And I asked my wife, I said, well, what is that they're saying? And she said, oh, it's a sign about injustice. And I said, well, now that's interesting, because just some months back, there was this large aggregation of people. I mean, they were blocks down the road with signs of dead babies, smiling babies, babies. And here it is. We're talking about lives that are actually here to protest about and to empower. And it's 2 white ladies in comparison to the 50 white individuals that, and maybe 2 or 3 blacks that were out there, fighting in regards to the rights of those unborn babies. And so I thought that it was interesting. But in that, the hope that I saw was that it was 2 white women, so that there were no black individuals holding up the signs about injustice in that square, but it was 2 white women. And the hope that I took from that was that even though it was not the 50 that were standing out there for the babies, at least there were 2 white individuals out there that thought enough to stand with each other and to stand in solidarity. And so we're beginning to see the progress, and sometimes progress does not happen as fast as we would like to see it. But I do believe that there is a shift that is taking place in our country. There's a shift that is taking place in our communities. And I do believe that this rage that we have seen, not just in this present time, but the rage of our ancestors, whether it be during the Jim Crow, or whether, even seeing it birthing out of the civil rights and even on, I do believe that this built on rage has really come to a place where I believe we're coming to the head of this thing. And I truly believe that our children will have a better life experience than we did. And then, also our foreparents, because we are choosing not to be quiet. Now, let me put this plug out here. If you are watching and you have not registered to vote, if you have not voted in your primary and they've already had the primary, shame on you, and you are part of the problem. Because the reality is, the only way that we're going to be able to change this thing from a legislative and a policy standpoint is if we are voting in those individuals who are listening and advocating for the voices of the oppressed. You cannot expect an oppressor to go and to vouch for the oppressed when the oppressor benefits off of the oppressed. So if you have not registered to vote, shame on you. And for those of you who are registered to vote and you didn't think that the primary was important enough, shame on you. Because every time we have an opportunity to get out there and vote, and I shared this with somebody, if you don't care to vote, vote for the simple fact that your foreparents had to suffer and some have died for you to be able to have the right to vote, especially as a black or brown body or minority body that's living in this country. They died for our right to vote. We can easily walk in and vote and come back out and it be nothing. And we have our little sticker and we put it on Instagram and we put it on Facebook and we put up the whole Facebook status, I voted, and all of that, which is good. I'm all for the hype, right? I'm all for it. I put on Instagram too. But at the end of the day, you got to remember that we are doing this twofold for those who fought for us, and we're doing it for the generation that is yet to come, because we want to make sure that their life experience is far greater than ours. So I want to move this conversation along because I know that the hour is drawing near.
But I want to real quick, Pastor. I'm gonna chime in on the rage, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I think when you're building a house, right, and you have your land, they always tell you that you have to clean up the ground. You have to clean up the foundation, because if you start to pour and you start to build your house, then it ends up impacting the integrity of the house. And so what we have seen for so many years is we have tried to build new policies. We've tried to make changes to a foundation that was faulty. We never went back to clean it up. We never went back to correct the problems. And so what happens is that we have this foundation. You start to put these policies into place and you wonder why it keeps dismantling, because we have not dug up the centuries, years of injustices that have happened. And so one thing when we talk about, is this effective, is that one thing that I appreciate about this movement is that it has called into question so many of the other cases that people did not catch on video, that people did not hashtag all over social media. And so we have the case of Breonna Taylor, who was killed by police officers in her home, who was not a threat to them, who was unharmed. And even now we are starting to have conversations around, well, what is justice for Kendrick Johnson, who was rolled up in a gym mat and left there to die? And somebody said that they rolled himself up in a gym mat. That is very, very heavy and very impossible. And so when we talk about what is effective, I really do appreciate, because of this movement and because people are so passionate, that we are starting to dig up all of those nasty bones, all of those nasty corpses that have really, really rocked and honestly is not there, and we will not be able to build a strong foundation. And so I think that, like, when we look at this, right, a couple of months ago, we saw white rage. Those that were on the far right went bananas because they were told they could not go outside because of a pandemic. I mean, once they found out that Black and brown people were dying at higher rates, they were like, grab your guns, grab your children, and let's go and show them that we have the power through our voice, and also through the fact that we can bear arms. And nothing was said about that, right? They were praised by the person who leads this country. And it was so sickening to see that. And then you see this protest where people are coming together in a peaceful manner during daylight with no guns. And you see aggressive force. You see the military being brought in, or National Guard being brought in, just to dismantle these protests. And so it is really, really sad. And so I think that for all governors, whether or not you are Democratic, whether or not you are Republican, I think that now is a time where you have to act swiftly, because when we saw white rage, we saw plans put into place. We saw phases go into place where this is our phase for opening up. And so I no longer want to see, no matter what your political affiliation is, I no longer want to see you drag your feet.
That's good. That's good. So in that, and I think we've kind of touched on a piece of this, but I want to go a little further into this question, right? Because we always lift this question whenever this time comes and we experience, this element of protest and seeing little glimmers and glimpses of hope. But where do we go from here, right? Because as Black Americans, biracial Americans, it's clear that we've got to build, we've got to create, and we've got to establish our own. But how does Black America really achieve equity, in a system that can only be sustained with the haves and the have-nots? So where do we go from here? And Shafiq, I want to start with you on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I know the ladies touched on this about, we have to have a plan for the next phase and what we're going to do next moving forward. And one thing that's been on my mind is, I think Black people, or whoever wants to be a part of the solution, we need to create an organization that is set up just like the business of the United States of America. The business of the United States of America has, 15 different departments: the Department of Education, Treasury, Energy, Housing, and Urban Development, and so on and so forth, agriculture. And I think when you start really to unpack racism, the rabbit hole gets deeper. We like to look at things that are brutal and the police brutality, which is a problem. But again, as I mentioned last week, if we don't address the economic side of it, we will continue to give police the opportunity to come into our communities and exploit African-American and brown men to say, hey, you look like a criminal, let me search you and find anything that I can get to further ruin your life. So we have to change that. So I was looking at the 15 departments, because we all, even as the Black community, have different views and visions on how we can come to the solution. You got your Malcolm X type, you got your Martin Luther King type, you got your Marcus Garvey type, and you got everyone in between. So, but you can go down the list, right? Housing and urban development, housing, the opportunity for fair housing. That is the leading cause for the wealth gap in the United States. I was reading, as a realtor, I had to do my continuing education to keep my license a few weeks ago, and I uncovered an interesting statistic that the difference in net worth between someone who rents their home and owns their home is 45 times greater. So in 2016, the average renter's net worth was $5,000. And the average homeowner's net worth was $231,000. We have to have access to buying homes, right? I know a lot of us are well educated and have good jobs, but we don't have equity to put these down payments on these houses to get us out of our neighborhoods. So you may make $80,000 or $90,000 and qualify for a $500,000 home, but you only got money in the bank to buy a $100,000 home. You see what I'm saying? Military, self-defense, the Department of Defense, Black people, we have to wake up. We have to stop looking at guns as a form of destruction. We have to also look at it as a form of safety, as a form of sport, because that's how white people look at it, okay? Agriculture, we don't have land. If we don't have land, we can't have food. We can't have homes. We can't do a lot of the things. You look at health. I don't even have to go into health, but think about it like this. What does your doctor say? Oh, you're African American. Are you watching what you eat because you know you're predisposed to diabetes? No, brother. Diabetes is not an African American disease. It's a socio-economic disease. Because if you're eating garbage, you're going to have a garbage body. And if you have a garbage body, you have a garbage mind. You understand what I'm saying? So you can go on and on through the list. And I know, you know, education, and we have so many things that we're at a disadvantage of. But if we could build an organization that actually has real funding, because if you look into a lot of government programs, they're there, but they have no funding. No funding means no success. So we have real programs, and I think it should be a for-profit organization. So you can have your celebrities to fund their money in there, and we can do the work to make sure that everyone has the same access to opportunity that everyone else in the United States has. You're on mute.
Thank you. That was really rich. And I hope that those of you who are listening and watching with us, that you will take the time. And this information is available on whitehouse.gov. You can go up there and see the 15 departments in which the president really oversees. And these are areas that we as a people are really being affected in. And go ahead, Shafiq. I see you got something else you got to say. Go ahead.
One thing I forgot to mention, I did take this quote from Department of Housing and Urban Development. So under their mission, under what they're trying to do for the community, it says this: building a community begins with job creation, employment, and the creation of a safe and decent, affordable housing living situation. So if that is their mission, they have failed in a lot of areas. And we have to, like you were saying, hold our senators and delegates accountable to make sure that they are moving their agenda forward for us. And we have to also, I would say this, I know a lot of Black people are Democrats. We have to stop giving Democrats votes just because they're Democrats. We have to actually make them come into our community and earn our vote. Democrat, Republican, Green Party, I don't care. You know, we have to make them start to earn our votes. But I will say one thing about Maryland. Maryland has done a good job with a lot of grant programs to make first-time home ownership really affordable. So if you do have any questions, feel free to send me a message, and I'll help you get in the game, not just to help me, but honestly, because when you have a house, you have equity, you increase your network. If you want to start a business, right? For example, say you want to cut grass and you get a house and in 2 years, you got $15,000 worth of equity in it. Guess what? You can take that $15,000 out and go buy your lawnmower equipment and then go make $15,000 a week. How does that sound? See what I'm saying? Get in the game. Stop renting.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies, Christian, I'm going to come on over to you. When we thinking about these 15 departments and really to kind of give everybody just kind of a backdrop, when we were offline last week, Shafiq really raised this for us, and it really just kind of put us in a thinking space. And each of us just kind of looked at those 15 departments to see kind of where we fall in, and our stake in it, and how we can empower the people that we have connection with and those whom they have connection with. So, Christian, for you, looking at these 15 departments, what really kind of speaks out to you, and as a Black woman that is in the community working, where do you see yourself in this and the change that can happen?
I would say I would fall in the Department of Health and Human Services. And the number one reason I'm there is a social worker is constant advocacy for human rights and the way that we have access to services, and also which government agencies allow us to be able to have access. Because one of the things that I began to found is some of the things I found as I began to dig deeper into how legislation is created and how bills even get on the agenda is understanding that a lot of information that has been put off has been based off of what is considered the garbage can method. So it's unlimited possibilities, it's unlimited solutions of what can be done, but it's never streamlined. It's never a policy connected to a problem, connected to a real solution. And so when you think about how even your healthcare is even, how you even acquire healthcare to cover any procedure for dental or even your mental health, some of the things that I uncovered is there are certain authorization limits upon these insurance companies that say after a certain amount of time, after 40 or 50 minutes, you'll have to get authorization for your services, for you to even be seen. And the same thing goes for even your dental care. You have these crappy dental insurance companies that act as third party that receive government money that also take your money because you're paying out of pocket for some of this stuff, and we're paying in taxes for a lot of this stuff, but we'll only pay $1,000 for major dental procedures. And so there's so many layers to just your overall healthcare that is impacted by how legislation agendas are even developed. And so some of the things that I want to encourage us to really do, and with Shafiq, when he talks about how you need to have these people as they come into your communities, make them testify and prove their role and prove what it is that they are really trying to do to move certain agendas forward. I think it's evidence when we look at Donald Trump's State of the Union address. That's your legislators' agenda right there before your eyes. That's the outline of what the people in legislative seats right now are pushing forward. And so that should be evidence, not just what we hear coming out the president's mouth, but what we read. We already know that our social well-being is not on the agenda, that is based off of title and position. We are seeing this in so many different levels. The cultures and values do not exist. Your human dignity and worth is not on that agenda. It's a lot of sensational events that are presented and things that are highlighted, but the health and well-being of you is not on there. And so as we begin to push things forward, and like, where do we go as the future of America? We have to pay attention to what the fads and trends are and identify what you want your community's culture and value to actually be. And we need to get back into positions where we are actually lobbying, not just for the standalone of our own organizations that are created, but for the well-being of all people, which means that we have to actually put fire to a lot of these institutions so that we can get opportunities to open up, so that the economy that is driving a lot of these policymakers, right? A lot of these decision makers are driven by money. And so knowing that, we have to be able to identify which policies, which organizations, which companies are attached to which legislation, who are the representatives that are supporting these legislations. And when we look at policy, not just look at policy to how we conduct and govern each other to interact with each other, but look at it as how we are going to move the mission of well-being for people forward. And so just digging deeper into this, it's multi-layered, but we have to also understand that chief executives influence the priorities within each executive branch that is governed by the president. So knowing that, we have to be able to understand that a lot of these policies that affect your health is because the legislators or they have personal gain in it. Their personal preference is what's driving it. They don't want to lose their supporters and those that have stake on it. So they're going to go in favor of what the majority wants. And knowing that a lot of them are using their executive seats just as a bully pulpit, period. And they take advantage of your health and my health. All of our health within our community is at stake because we're allowing a person that has never had diabetes, a person that has never had heart failure, a person that has never been on food stamps, a person that has never had to experience a governmental program is making these decisions and then defunding these organizations and agencies when the paperwork doesn't align with what they put into legislation. And so it's also holding our community agencies accountable. Don't just have me checking off boxes. Don't have a suicide hotline. We just had this conversation today. Don't have a suicide hotline for me to call if I need help. And then you put me on hold because you really don't have enough people behind those seats. There's a shortage in mental health out here. There's a shortage in people that are actually trained professionals and processes and procedures that are going to move things forward so that you can get the healthcare that you actually need. I think that right now is a prime time. I think that where we are now in regards to getting bills on the agenda, we are in what is considered streams under the activate mode. That means that we have politics, we have problems, and we have real solutions that could take place, but it's going to take for us to have the people that are in those seats to get in support of them, which means we have to lobby and we have to get loud. You got to bring the media in. You have so many different things that you have to do right now because the data is already there. We don't need to collect data. Every time somebody called a hotline, data. Every time somebody turned in reports or case notes, data. They got the data. They know these mental health consequences exist. Now we need to see how are you going to respond and how are things going to work in our favor.
Wow. That's good. That's good. Wow. First Lady, where did you see yourself in this, in these 15 departments?
Yeah, so I saw myself in education. And so one thing that people do not understand about education is that education is not created equal across state lines. Your education that you get here in Illinois could be completely different from what you will receive even across the river in Missouri. And so Betsy DeVos, when she came into office, there was this big talk about what her values are. And she said that she was really interested in creating more charter schools and also private education. And what people did not understand is although charter schools, yes, may be a good idea, is also a lot of privatized money that is in charter schools. We also have to look at how charter schools are regulated in each state, and we also have to look at access. And so when we look at what her values are for education, and you might have seen in your communities more charter schools starting to open up, is that charter schools are often owned by a privatized corporation. And this corporation could be anyone. They could be someone that is a CEO of a large company. It could be a nonprofit that decided to come together just to do a charter school. We just saw that LeBron James a couple of years ago opened up a charter school. And so when we look at these charter schools and what the regulations are in each state, in Maryland, when I was teaching, there was this big thing around charter schools are run by three things. Philanthropy, which is having people come to your school to look at your curriculum, to go into your classrooms so that they can give you money. Grants, so grants that are out there that you apply for just to get extra money for student resources, to get money just to hire for positions. And then the third part of that is the state funding that you would get as a public school. And so what was really, really big in Baltimore is we saw that all schools, no matter if you were charter or you were public, were all getting the same amount of per pupil funding, right? And so you start to introduce inequities when you have a school that has $3 million in philanthropy, plus maybe another $5 million that they've gotten from grants, plus they're getting paid for every single child that is in those seats, right? Not to mention that the regulations are not the same, which means that you can hire people that are not certified. You can hire folks that may not even have done any type of science classes, but be teaching science. And so it's very, very little regulation depending on where you are. So for instance, in Baltimore, any charter school in Baltimore City is considered a Baltimore City public school. So they fall under Baltimore City. So they have to follow the same regulations and the same guidelines unless you are hired directly by the charter school. If you are looking at a place like St. Louis, they separate their public schools and their charter schools. So charter schools operate completely separate. So you're talking about charter schools that have a bunch of money, right? Plus they're getting paid per pupil. But when you start to look at the functions of some of these charter schools, and mind you, I am not against charter schools because I used to teach at one. I think they're great. I think when they're ran right, they actually do produce rigorous education and opportunities for our kids. But then we start to look at them, and if you look, the teachers are getting paid very, very little, while your executive director and all those on your executive staff are getting six-figure salaries and sitting pretty, and most of them are not people of color. And so when you look at your board, the board is by a bunch of people who are predominantly white, who have a lot of money and get to give a bunch of money, thousands and millions of dollars to these schools as a tax write-off, so that they said that they did something or that they gave to something, but also have control on how your charter school is ran. And so we have to start looking at how does education and the policy place play a role in what ultimately will shape our kids, and who is actually sitting in front of our kids, and not just sitting in front of them in the classroom, but who is in the offices making decisions and who's in the board meetings making decisions, because those are the people who ultimately determine what your students' education will really look like. And so I think the other part that really resonated with me when I was kind of looking at these 15 cabinets and started doing a little research is there is a cabinet member called the administrator of the Small Business Administration. Her name is Javonta, I think it's Carranza. And Javonta Carranza was actually the vice president of air operations for UPS. UPS is not a small organization, right? And so what we saw when we had this whole COVID thing and we got the CARES Act and we started talking about these PPP loans is that these small businesses, which we wouldn't consider small, those Wells Fargos, apparently the Lakers are a small business. We started to see these small businesses that we wouldn't consider small businesses get this money. But why? It's because we have someone who used to be the CEO of a major multi-million-dollar company, who was the vice president of a major multi-million-dollar company, sitting inside of a seat to make decisions for small businesses, right? And so that's why you keep seeing that wealth gap. That's why you keep seeing these big businesses that we would consider big businesses reap all the benefits. They get all the funding that they need. They make sure, the president makes sure that they good. Why? Because he has major companies. And so he has to make sure that even if his name isn't on them, they're still running, because eventually he won't be president. And eventually he'll go back to running Trump Enterprises. So he don't want to see those go under. And so we really have to start looking at who are these people running these cabinets and what are their actual values.
That's good. Thank you so much. Sydney, I want to end it off with you. Just kind of as we were looking at these 15 departments, where do you see yourself in this?
Yeah, first I would just like to commend Lady Rashonda. That was an education on education for me. So thank you for that. And I kind of honed in on education too, but in sort of a different light and in two kind of parts. So one has something to do with what Lady Rashonda was just sharing with us, which is the disparities between funding for education. And I'm sure everyone has seen, maybe not everyone, but lots of people have seen the infographic that was created about systemic racism. It's been all over Instagram. That's where I saw it. So I'm sure many have seen it by now. And it talked about how the funding between schools in lower income communities and higher income communities are funded by the property taxes in those areas. So obviously, schools that are in areas that have higher income are going to be better funded, and vice versa for lower income areas. And that makes it so that education is not equitable. And if we can, the infographic does a really great job. So I would maybe Google it if you haven't seen it. But if we can address education and make it an equitable system, we can lead to a place where people in lower income areas, which are Black communities affected, largely affected, we can allow them to have a better education, which would make for a better setup for the workforce or for higher education, whatever their postgraduate endeavors are, which would then lead for better employment, which then gets, so you go from education to employment. And then that leads to a better chance for more wealth. You know, if you're able to get a good education or be set up for success after graduation, you can have a better opportunity to get a well-paying job, which would lead you to then have more wealth. And in that case, then you could be more set up for housing to be able to buy a house. And so I think I was just starting to think about these 15 departments, and I noticed how maybe if we start with education, we can affect a lot of other areas after that. And the other part of education that has hit me over this past week, and it started during the protest that I attended in Bel Air, that, as I mentioned, I wish I could remember the name of the person who shared this and give her credit, because she deserves it. And it's one of those things, when she was sharing this, that I felt silly that I had never given a thought to it, this had never occurred to me. I was embarrassed and mad at myself for this. But she was talking about how our education system is very Euro focused. That was the statement at first. And I was like, wow. So our education system teaches us a lot about the success and the contributions that white people have given to civilization. Conversely, it does not teach us about the successes and the contributions that Black people have given to civilization. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem, because it's perpetuating discrimination. So these are thoughts that started to occur to me at this protest. And then I saw a video this morning that a friend shared on Instagram, and I also shared because it hit me with the same power. That it was a video of this reverend who was speaking to an integrated crowd. I would guess that this video took place maybe in the late 60s, because the crowd was integrated, and it was a conversation about race. And the reverend was talking about education. There were several questions from the crowd about what can we do to fix education. Now, first of all, it hit me that we're having this discussion right now, 50 plus years later, which is really sad. Why are we having this same conversation, which occurred to people 50 years ago, and we haven't accomplished much to change it, right? But here we are, maybe this is our time, right? So the Reverend was talking about how the fact that our education system teaches us more about white people and what they've contributed to civilization, that's unfair to all people, because it's leaving out the contributions that Black people have given to civilization, and that perpetuates discrimination. It plants a seed in children's minds that look at all the things that white people have contributed, and leave out all the things that Black people have contributed. And there plants the seed of kind of Black inferiority, not necessarily white supremacy. That can be perpetuated by other things later, but the seed is planted there because we're learning more about white people and what they've contributed than Black people. And so that's where the inequity begins, right? And we need to, so that's been hitting me really hard. And I don't have the answers, unfortunately. I know that I need to do more research myself and continue to educate myself on how we can affect education. But it's hit me that if the education system doesn't change, if we continue to just learn more about what white people have contributed to civilization and less about Black people, then we need to take it upon ourselves. And the Reverend was saying this in the video too. We need to take it upon ourselves in our homes, in Black communities, to educate ourselves about what Black people have contributed to civilization, and make sure that we're teaching our children that, right? Because that's how we can prove that we're not inferior, no matter what the history books are teaching us, or the history books, the lessons from those history books that we're being taught are telling us. We have contributed so much. There's so much about the Black community and Black culture that is important, and that you need to know so that you can be proud of it, so that, when you don't hear about it in school, you still know about it, And like I said, I don't know how, I don't have all the answers for this, but I know that as individuals, we can take it upon ourselves to educate ourselves about our history and our heritage, and make sure that we're teaching our children that, so that they can teach their children that. And maybe somewhere along the way, we can start teaching it in schools, so that it's part of civilization. And, we can kind of close that gap. And I really do hope we can, because it blows my mind, like I said, that we're having the same conversation 50 years later and education is exactly the same. I don't even know how that's possible, but yet here we are. So, I'm just taking from this, and I hope anyone who's watching takes from it a lesson that we're missing a lot of history. I'm missing a lot of history. I haven't learned about a lot of history, and I need to go educate myself about that, so that I can pass that on to other people, because until it's being taught in the school system, it's being left out, and that's unfair. I think you're on mute.
I did it again. Thank you so much, Sydney. And really, to your point, I was on a Zoom call earlier today, and we were just kind of talking about education, and big shout out to superintendent in District 189 here in East St. Louis. The superintendent has actually committed to instilling in the curriculum for next year conversation about race, and to understand the injustices and the inequities that Black Americans face. And so I do want to say this to my Black brothers and sisters that live in predominantly Black areas. Please don't live in the ignorance that just because you are raised in an all Black area, and you go to an all Black church, and you attend an all Black school system, that you don't need to be educated on systemic racism and educated on inequities. Because here's the thing: if you don't educate your children today, life will educate them tomorrow. And my, same thing goes out to our white brothers and sisters, that a part of you being an ally, a part of you being an advocate, is also making sure that when you leave your 9-to-5 from your nonprofit, when you leave from protesting with us, that you actually go home. And that same Amazon that you are ordering everything else, order you some books, so that you can begin to learn about Black literature. Order you some Langston Hughes, order you some W.E.B. Du Bois. Come on, order those things, so that you can begin to learn our history and where we come from, that we have always been thinkers, that we have always been bright individuals, and we have been a part of the fabric of this country. And shout outs to Dr. Cassandra Gould in Jefferson City, who has given me this term, the ununited states of America. That's really where we are right now. And we're learning how to be united, but it really begins with education, and also learning how to not only have the conversation, but after the conversation, actually putting in some work. So again, I just want to give a big hand clap to our panel guests who have blessed us these past 2 weeks. I want to celebrate each of you who have been watching. and have really supported this effort that we have brought to really have this conversation, this color contrast conversation. If I could leave you with anything, I do. I want to leave you with this. The Bible reminds us very, very intently in Philippians that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And I know that for some people, they may say, well, that's cliche, Pastor. But I truly believe that the Lord has endowed you and I with the power and the intellect to make the change happen that we believe is necessary. Before we get off tonight, I do want to share with each and every one of you, for those who may not know, I do have a blog in which I do share monthly which is originally geared towards young pastors. But this month's blog is really geared towards all. And I really talk about the night racism impacted me personally. And so as you can see on your screen, there's the link. You can go right to www.jkj2ministries.org, and you'll be able to go to the Young Pastor's Journey blog, and you'll be able to read that blog. And I want to hear from you, just even your experiences with racism and how you are moving forward in being a part of the change. And let me challenge you, because I know not everyone is called to be Martin Luther King. Not everyone is called to be Malcolm X. Not everyone is called to be Marcus Garvey, but you are to be who God has purposed you to be, and find your voice and find your knowledge. That's what my challenge is to you, because as you begin to learn yourself and learn the richness of your brothers and your sisters, you can begin to be that ally and that advocate for the change that needs to take place in our communities. Listen, as I say every week, that not only am I a man of intellect and a man that wants to see justice, but I'm also a man of faith. And for those of you who are joining us today, I want you to know that no matter what you are experiencing in your life, the loving arms of the Lord is very much still available and very much evident in the world that we're living in. In fact, some of us can testify to the fact that we have been seeing the hand and the power of God so much more in this season than we've ever seen before in our lives. And so I want to challenge you today. If you have never accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as your personal Savior, I want you to consider today giving the Lord your heart and giving the Lord a try. What do you mean, Pastor? I'm glad you asked. The Bible reminds us that God loved us so much, according to John 3:16, that God gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Let me dispel this misnomer that coming to the Lord does not eliminate your troubles and your trials. This conversation is evident of that, right? But what happens when you come to the Lord is that not only do you receive a spiritual covering, but now God promises to give you his spirit that will walk with you and guide you every step of the way. I truly believe that as we look even at our own Black history and look at individuals like Dr. King and Robert Abernathy and even individuals, if you may so choose to look at him, Reverend Al Sharpton, individuals who have grown up in the faith, individuals who have accepted Christ, and the Spirit of the Lord was leading and guiding them. And so I want to challenge you today, if you've never accepted the Lord and you feel the nudging and the urging of the Spirit of God pulling and tugging you, I want you to do something as we call a sign of faith. It's an act of faith. And I want you to just take your hand and stretch it towards this screen. And I want you to repeat this prayer after me. Lord Jesus, I'm a sinner and I need your grace. I realize that I have been living my life on my own terms, and I'm ready to make you the Lord of my life. Come into my heart, come into my mind, and show me what new life is like. In Jesus' name, amen. Listen, I believe that there's somebody who's prayed that prayer for the first time. And I want you, if you're not in this area, I want you to find you a Bible believing and Bible teaching church where you can grow in the Lord. In this virtual season, feel free to join us. Every Sunday, 10:15, we are on our virtual space. But I want you to know that God is on your side. Again, panel members, thank y'all so much for being with us tonight. Thank you, our virtual family, for being with us. And I look so much forward to what's getting ready to happen in our country. November, get out and vote. Get out and vote. If you are seeing what's happening in this world, we need a change. And yes, some people may say we have to vote between the lesser of two evils. However you put it, get out there and vote. Before we leave tonight, I do want to breathe this prayer of benediction over your life. Let's pray together. God, who is our refuge and strength, a very present help in times of trouble. God, we thank you tonight for this opportunity, this conversation. I thank you for every individual who has been a part of this conversation, whether on our panel or just watching. I pray, God, that your liberating spirit, your powerful spirit is reaching everyone right now. And I pray, God, that as we leave from this space, but never from your presence, that God, you would be with us. I pray that your peace would surround us, that your love would fill us, and that the hope that we have in you would rise up in us and cause us to do great exploits for the kingdom of God. We thank you in the name of the Father, in the name of the Son, in the name of the precious Holy Spirit. And all of God's children and creation said, amen. God bless you all. I hope you have a great night. We love you. And remember, you are a gift from God, and Black Lives Matter. God bless you.